Welcome to an episode of Oh So Curious. We've had quite a week, haven't we? A lot of stuff going on. I'm feeling good. I hope you're feeling good. And joining me today is Dan. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well. How does it go in on the West Coast, I suppose I should say.
Well, the sun finally came out. It's been kind of gloomy, overcast, October-y weather. We had some beautiful clouds yesterday, I was going to say. And yeah, this was a week of all kinds of entertainment news, and certainly a lot of people on TikTok had things to say and
Oh,
to
yeah.
us. But what's before we get into all the stuff, what's happening today?
What's happening? Oh, there's a lot happening today. Let
Would you
me
care to
let
run
me
us through
take
it?
us yeah, the rundown as we call it. Here we go. So we'll start off with the Black Adam review, of course, the big movie of the week, the newest film in the DCEU. Gildart Jackson joined us recently, talking about Gotham Knights, the game that just recently came out. We interviewed him about that. We will then continue our DC-themed ways with a State of the DCU debate, and then we will switch our gears with an ANDOR Ep7 review before we finish things up by looking ahead to next week. I believe our episode next week is the day before Halloween, so we're just gonna look ahead to talking about the year in horror. Roland's gonna be back on the show next week, and he's gonna tell us like all about the best horror of the year. I think like for example, right now, the new season of Chucky is about to start airing on USA
Oh
Network and
yeah,
Sci-Fi. Halloween
they've been.
Ends is out in theaters and on Peacock. So there's a lot going on Halloween wise.
Yeah,
So
actually, it's been a hell of a year for horror. A lot of good stuff, a lot of weird stuff. I don't know. I liked it. Before we move on to all the other stuff, be sure to be our friend, join the community, be our enemy, troll me in the comments. We love that. We really love that. And,
yeah,
just be part of the movie fan community. We're on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get a podcast, Instagram, TikTok. You know we're on TikTok now. And why don't we
we
why don't we
are.
move right ahead with people's burning questions and
Yeah, I mean, comment of the week. If you have never seen the show before, the it's exactly what it sounds like. We pick up comments from the week on stuff that we have posted on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram. I don't think we've done much TikTok before, but this
I
week
don't think
was
we've ever
a
had this much engagement on TikTok before.
right. Yeah, and this week we went from very little to very
Quite
much,
a bit.
and yeah, we're gonna start off with the TikTok stuff, and basically, Andrew, you posted a reel that was talking about Dr. Fate and the comparison between the character of Dr. Fate in the DC comics versus Doctor Strange in the Marvel comics, and the
Yeah.
similarities and differences or lack thereof, I suppose. So we
Hmm.
got a very passionate response from the TikTok community of movie fans. So
Hmm.
here's a look at just a few of the many comments we got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any stand
Should
out?
we should we read this aloud?
Yeah, I mean you can read a couple of them. I mean, the guys listening to the
Sure.
podcast, they don't know what we're seeing on screen.
Tell me you've never read a comic without telling me you've never read a comic. This movie was also unfortunately twice as good as the last Doctor Strange movie. Doctor Fate was created like 25 years before Doctor Strange. Hey, newsflash, I know. Marvel fan here. Doctor Fate was created in 1940. Yeah, Strange in 63. Yes, yes. I know Doctor Fate was published first. Let's just put that there on the table. However, the segment was about the timing. Because, yeah, obviously Marvel and DC are competing, but Doctor Strange was the first more obscure character from Marvel to make an appearance on the screen to become a popular character in modern pop culture. And doesn't really matter that Dr. Fate came out first. It's the fact that DC, only after the success of Doctor Strange in the movies, would first put him in a movie, second, cast them to look similar and costume them to look similar. And now that I've seen the movie, and I prefer Dr. Fate, he's a much cooler character who actually serves a narrative purpose. And I like the way Pierce Brosnan did it. That was great. However, this looks like a reaction to Doctor Strange. Even the CGI of the magic, it's done differently. The style is different, but come on.
There's similarities.
Yes, they're
like
similar.
the whole, I think in Doctor Strange they say it's like the mirror. They're accessing the mirror dimension or something when he's creating all these reflective matrices and
Yeah.
using that to make things disappear or transport them into from one place to the next. Yeah. No, there's similarities. I agree with you. I mean, I mentioned we had this very passionate conversation that we will probably dive into deeper later on in the show about, yeah, the context within which the two characters exist in the comics is very different, and then the movie, like I think now
Yeah.
it's kind of self-evident they're two very different characters, but yes, there's visual similarities, and there's probably Hollywood executives out there who looked at the success because this movie was in production around the same time as, well, Infinity War and those movies were coming out, Avengers Endgame, and then they were getting ready to probably go into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So Doctor Strange had been in a lot of different, recent big Marvel hits. So they were looking at it and saying, well, that kind of a magical character does well. We have
Yeah.
had Constantine do well on TV for DC, so why not take Fate? And then I think the larger context of this movie, you had the Justice Society featured in the movie, where even toward the end, the kid gets tossed this shirt, which is this classic Justice Society of America shield logo on it. So Dr. Fate is being one of those classic characters that's been associated with the Justice Society since almost its inception. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
makes sense.
I'm not here to say that DC is copying Marvel in terms of creating a character. That's a ridiculous claim. Obviously. But what I'm saying is that when you make this kind of move as a business decision, as a marketing decision, this looks like you are looking at someone else's success and trying to replicate that success for yourself, which happens in business. I think they could have made him more different if they really wanted to, but I'm actually pretty satisfied with the way they pulled it off. I like this character. If I could respond also to another one of those comments, it's it's really sad. I think it said it's really sad that these grown men, what does it say? That these grown men didn't even know this. They probably don't even read the comics. They only know the basic stuff of Dr. Fate. Ha 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 ha. I love that comment because I used to be into comics at a time in my life when I could be described as a child. I think comic books, superheroes, are for children. In the audience, mostly children, I would say. They make these exciting, and clearly there's a lot of adult children out there who enjoy these movies, and I review them. But I'm an adult. I don't read comics anymore. I'm looking at the business decisions here, and I'd encourage you to be adults too.
Well, I think that leads us right into a video response we got to that
Good.
TikTok. I keep calling them Reels because I'm an Instagram first person, but yeah, we got a video response to that TikTok of the Dr. Fate and Doctor Strange comparison. So let me cue that up for you so you can take a listen. It was funny.
I can't wait. The character's name is Dr. Fate. How can you say you're not trying to compete with the MCU?
This is embarrassing. You should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed. You should be very embarrassed. Because Dr. Fate is at least 23 years older than Doctor Strange. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not embarrassed because that's not the point that I was making. Again, as I've said, this is about the business decisions of the movie studios to create two things that are very similar. One clearly looking at the other having had success. I don't think I should be embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed. I won't be embarrassed. I think, you hiding behind a filter and Google searching something as a knee-jerk reaction to a video you probably didn't finish, which was short. I made it short for you. You know, you could all probably take the information in, understand what I'm trying to say, watch the full context of the video, if you didn't feel you got enough context to understand that I wasn't talking about the comics, but the decision to put him in a movie right after the success of Doctor Strange. I think we've pretty much put a cap on that. You have anything else you want to add there, Dan?
No, I think you nailed it. I personally, I looked at this character in the movie trailers. I went and saw the movie last night, and knowing from even like the animated shows, the Justice League animated show, and like comics and stuff like that, I mean, I did not know up until a few years ago just how closely aligned some of their surface level qualities are in terms of like, you know, their magic capabilities. Origin story wise, yeah, they're very different characters. I mean, it's
completely
it's
different mythology, execution similar.
Yes, absolutely. And I, you know, like you're making the business case, which I think is a very fair point, because I'll agree with you there. The Hollywood it's show business, and as part of that term, you know, business is a big part of it, if not the bigger part of it. You know, the show doesn't work if it's not, you know, doing good business. So to that end, yeah, absolutely. I think they were looking at it and saying, you know what, the character is pretty cool onto its own, but if you want to find a comp, there's Doctor Strange for you, and he's working out quite well for Marvel.
Yeah,
and
in a vacuum, I am so much more compelled by the understated, like not as showy, sarcastic, similar sarcasm, of Dr. Fate. He's this like refined older gentleman who gets driven around in a car, and like he's got some mystery to him, but it's not the I have super magical powers and what's going. I mean, even the way they treat his death and his acceptance of it is...
Oh, spoilers.
I don't care. I don't care. The fact is, yeah, here's a spoiler. I love that he's not going to be around forever. I love that he was an integral part of the plot. He drove it forward. You could not tell this story without him. And genuinely, I got a sense of his character. And one of the big complaints I've had about Marvel... Oh, and let me just say, I'm not a Marvel fan. Anybody calling me a Marvel... I watch those movies reluctantly, okay?
Hey, and I can attest to that. I've had to try really hard to convince
Don't ever
Andrew
mistake me. Don't ever mistake me for a Marvel fan. I've been a DC boy for a long, long time. I got the DC encyclopedia right over there. I love those things. But Fate, being able to see into the future, there's a beautiful line where he goes, for the first time, I don't see anything. And the sense of relief that he feels.
He literally says, and it's beautiful, right? Like
Yeah.
that's his, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's to be somebody who's always worrying and always like looking ahead, you know, sure, you could probably make some good investments. But you know, it's not always a blessing. It's a curse. You know, he's been cursed with visions of the future, and he uses his circumstances to do good in the world, which is noble. It doesn't feel quite so much like the Doctor Strange story in terms of how he's used. It's a completely different setup. But we get to the fight scenes, and while they may not be mirrors, he does clone himself, which was also really cool to watch.
And to be fair, that's a very common thing you see in anime, you see it in video games. It just happens to be in a superhero genre of movies. Actually, not even Doctor Strange wasn't even the first one. I'm pretty sure there's X-Men movies where you see mutants doing that stuff all the time. It's just, I think, a lot of people have this recency bias where and to be fair, there's a lot of people who much younger than us, and it's not like we're old. Like I think we're both like relatively young, but like I think what would you say? We're like in our still in our 20s or 30s. I don't know.
Late 20s.
Yeah, so we're not like exactly like, you know, old, quote unquote.
No.
But there's a
But I've
lot of
decided
people
not
out
to be a
there,
kid for a while.
right? But there's a lot of like people out there who are like maybe, I don't know, in their teens or like their early 20s or stuff, who grew up on the MCU. Like to them, they don't
Yeah.
really remember a world before the MCU. So there's a recency bias there where they will associate first with any comparison to the MCU before they do anything else. Whereas I think, and then not everybody, there's people who, maybe that age, but they do know their like movie history a little bit better or more
Sure.
extensively. So yeah, that ability, for example, again, it's not something we haven't seen before. I think this is where it's the impetus of the filmmakers, and we can again dive into this more detail later, where they have to take something that has been done many times before, as like every story has been told like many times before, and you have to just kind of put your own unique spin on it. And I think in this movie we got that. I think they used that power of cloning in different ways than I've seen it before, which was exciting.
No, that's the other thing. In this, we'll get into the whole Black Adam discussion, but I just got to say, like, there was a reason for just about everything. And, like, it wasn't just, like, blast for blast's sake. It was, like, there was a strategy and there was a reason for the moves that they made. And you can see that. I appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there, we're going to spend a lot of this episode talking about Black Adam because we have a lot to say about it. Anything else? Are you watching anything else lately or seeing
Well, we
anything?
do have another comment of the week. I mean, yeah, we're going to spend a
Oh,
lot of time talking
really?
about Black Adam. So why
Oh
don't
my God.
we take a few minutes and give those to She-Hulk? I know you said we were done last week, but we're still getting comments, and there was a couple of good ones. So here's one for the She-Hulk episode 9, the finale review video on YouTube.
Y'all some weirdos. That's fine.
Yeah, Charlie Ray.
I don't know why.
I don't know what context of that reaction was. I mean, other than
Sorry,
I
Charlie.
know what we talked about, but we reviewed that episode for a good like half hour. I feel like we went a long time talking about that
Yeah.
movie or that episode, which
Yeah.
I got real passionate about it. So I don't know. Call us weirdos if you want.
Fine. I've been a weirdo. It's okay.
It divided the panel. I think Roland and I were on two opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of our reception of She-Hulk as a whole, like as a series or
whole.
a season. I still, the one thing I'll say about it's still, I think the point I was trying to make throughout the video was that show got sidetracked trying to make like these socio-political statements.
Yep.
At the expense of the story. And I'm never against the idea of a show making socio-political statements as long as you also tell a good story. Because I think the thing that should always come first in any medium of storytelling is the story. It's part of the word storytelling. If you're not telling a good story, then you're not a good storyteller. So I think that's where the show really lacked. Like they were so busy with all the like things like the cameos and like they spoofed the live action Hulk show intro in the finale episode. Only in the finale episode, and I guess they were trying to tie it down to how Jen Walters, like She-Hulk, goes crazy at the end of the previous episode, so it felt natural.
Actually,
but the timing still was off. Like that was my problem with the show.
That's the thing. You said from early on that like the 8th episode became the first episode, and the timing is off, and like
yeah, the show didn't know what it wanted to be.
What I want to know is like, would this show be salvageable if it were re-edited properly into like, could you tell this story well? Are these compelling characters, or is it really not an issue with the order of things? Because that's the one out that I was willing to give them.
Yeah, if you were to re-edit this, what I would do with the show is I would take it and turn it into a 2.5-hour long movie. Like you think about this, right? On average, if you take out the credits, intro and outro credits, you're looking at about 20 minutes roughly per episode, and maybe a few of them were a little longer, some of them were slightly shorter. On average, 20 minutes for 9 episodes equals to what? There's like 3 hours of content there. So if you were to turn it into a 2.5 hour long movie, you cut out like half hour to an hour of fat. And to me, you had enough to work with. You still have to reorder a lot of things because the show did a lot of extraneous things like too many cameos. Not to mention, in like episode 3 or 4, I think it was, She-Hulk like breaks the fourth wall to tell us, just know who the show is about. I'm sure you're worried that there's a lot of cameos here. Just remember, it's my show. And the next episode is titled, Whose Show Is This? And it's like a theme that they constantly keep hinting at, and yet she gets sidelined by like these cameos where sometimes the story still focuses on her, but you know the audience is focused on the cameo, like the Daredevil or the lack thereof. The fact that they kept teasing.
Isn't it because of your disgust with it, I guess, you don't consider yourself part of the audience? When you see that stuff, what do you feel as the audience? Because you are the audience.
As I watch the show, you mean? Or
Yeah. When you see those things.
Well, the cameos. Okay, remember we did this video before the show started, like 5 reasons to watch She-Hulk and 5 reasons not to watch She-Hulk. To me, that was like prophetic in hindsight, because I mentioned, like, I think the 5 reasons to watch all 5 reasons were a cameo apiece, all 5 of which we got, and we got even more cameos than those. Like, I don't think we included Scar, who's like the son of Hulk, that they randomly introduced for like 5 seconds in the end of the last episode, which felt like they could have taken more time with that in the movie and then sort of build on it. Whereas here they're just like, oh hey, by the way guys, here's my son Scar, and then we just move on. They were having this Fast and Furious style like family dinner at the end.
Don't do it.
What? No, I don't even know if I have one of those hanging around.
Brother never told you never threaten a man's family?
Yeah, I didn't have to do that.
Yeah,
We haven't
I
had
did
one
do
of those in a while, actually.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Anyway, but it kind of, that whole scene reminded me of that. Them like sitting in the backyard, and the whole me familiar, like there's no, he's not there. There's no Dom in the picture. But anyway, the whole cameos thing, it bothered me because they were misplaced and mistimed often. And while not every cameo outshone the main character of the show, a lot of them did. Like the first episode, I think most people will remember it for how they perceived it mistreating Mark Ruffalo's Hulk character more than they treated it, like, they perceived it as, or remember it as, the first episode of She-Hulk. I think a lot of people look back at the series premiere and they're like, they did Hulk dirty in that episode. And if that's what you're walking
I
away
certainly
from,
didn't like him.
then the storytellers failed at making it a good series premiere, because the series premiere is all about, you set up your main character, you kind of tell us what their motivations are, and it did do that, but ultimately it got overshadowed by the Hulk, his presence, and the way, and you risk that with some of these cameos because those characters are simply more popular, like Daredevil and the Hulk. But at the same time, you have to kind of look ahead and see that, yes, that's going to end up happening. So maybe we don't like give an entire episode, like maybe the Hulk should have been a part of the episode, and then like the second half he shouldn't be there. Whereas the first episode he was there the whole time. And then
Here's the thing.
then you get Hulk withdrawal for the next 3 episodes. Then you have a one scene with him, and then he pops in at the last episode, and then the show decides that it's not okay for the Hulk to just show up and overshadow her now, even though it was okay to do it in the very first episode for the entirety of the episode. And now
So
she's making jokes like,
what you're
I
telling me
smash
is
things.
like,
I'm like,
it's really not salvageable, right? Like they did too
you have to
many
do a
things
lot.
wrong in this.
you need to do like open heart surgery to this show to truly fix it. And even then, I think there's just fundamental writing issues with the dialogue, and the fourth wall
Yeah.
breaks, and I did not have a very high opinion of the series, and I'm somebody who has largely enjoyed a lot of the Disney
You
Plus
can be
shows.
generous with your reviews.
Yeah.
You go easier on things than I do, for sure.
It takes a lot
but
to like really tick me off about something. I'm like, there's some
not me. I got a
cardinal
short fuse.
sins on the writing of the show that I just can't forgive. So,
Yeah. Well, I'll say it again because I got bamboozled into talking about it again. Can't wait to never talk about this show ever again. In the meantime, be our friend. We're on ohsocurious.com. We even have our own .com. You know, Instagram, all those socials, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Spotify, iTunes. Yeah, do they call it? No, they call it Apple Music now. Whatever. We're out there. Find us, join us, and subscribe and interact with us because we like that. Moving on, we got to talk about Black Adam because, you know,
Yes, we do.
that was this week's big movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more than just this week's big movie. This is a movie that's been on my what would you call it, my radar for quite some time, and honestly, going into the movie, I'm sure you saw like some of the reactions from critics and the Rotten Tomatoes score, and it was coming in pretty low. I think it was sitting in the 40s or 50s when I went to see the
Rotten
film.
Tomatoes did not like this thing at all.
Yeah, the critics at least. And then I saw
Critics.
that when the audience scores were put up, like with the first 1,000 or so reviews, it debuted like in the high 80s, like 88 or 89. I don't know where it's sitting right now. I can try to pull it up, but
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, I went into this movie and in one sentence, it was a lot more fun than I thought it would be based on the reviews and the word of mouth I was getting, at least from, the
Yeah.
internet. So,
I swear, like, it's like Marvel has a deal with Rotten Tomatoes or something because
I was just
they
gonna say,
do. They do.
Warner Brothers actually owns Rotten Tomatoes, the site.
Really?
Yes, they're the ultimate parent
Fascinating.
company of Rotten Tomatoes. So that is a
That's so
misconception
weird.
sometimes for people, which is it is like sort of a conflict of interest onto its own. But yes, Warner Brothers is ultimately the owner of Rotten Tomatoes.
And yet it didn't influence this.
Well,
That's
because
actually good to know.
yeah, I mean the critics, the Rotten Tomatoes certified critics. I guess that's what they thought about the movie, and we can dive into it. I'm not gonna say this was a flawless film. I mean, but
It
before I
wasn't.
do that, you tell what were your overall impressions of the movie?
So, honestly, like, as I've said before, I've never really been a Marvel fan. I like the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And Marvel movies have really annoyed me lately because they've become homogenous and also like, it's like eating a bag of Skittles for, a giant bag of Skittles. It all just blends together and tastes like nothing at the end of the day. A lot of sugar, a lot of candy, but it doesn't taste like anything. So I was not prepared to like this movie. I'm not a big rock fan, and I didn't know the character particularly well. And they've been saying we don't want to compete with Marvel. We don't want to out Marvel. And for the most part, I gotta say, they did their own thing here. And I actually really liked The Rock's portrayal of Black Adam. He wasn't trying to be cute. And anytime he leaned into doing a little bit of the self-aware humor, I thought that was kind of wrong. Every little joke, Atom Smasher, I think annoyed me the most out of all the characters.
I
'Cause
liked the guy.
I didn't like him. I just thought, like,
I had the
you know what,
opposite reaction to both of those things. For the
Really?
record. Yeah.
I was so... This movie really does show the contrast of what DC could be to Marvel. Because we didn't have the bright colors. Not everything was shot on a green screen. It wasn't just like overwhelming your senses.
A lot of
with
it was
color
shot.
and-
I could tell a lot of the movie it was shot on green screen, especially a lot of the
But
exterior
it wasn't.
stuff.
It wasn't crazy CG of like
Yeah.
the latest Thor movie, which was like all
Which I
on
think the
green
problem
screens.
with because the CG in this movie, there's a lot of green screen works. Obviously, there's a lot of CG, but I think the way they graded, the color graded everything,
That's
and
what I'm
it's sort
talking
of
about.
it had this uniformity where I think the candy effect that you're talking about, like in Thor, it just felt like you're looking at some combination of a rainbow of colors and like
It looked like
the
a bunch
latest
of
Thor.
internet pop-up ads to me. That's what
Yeah.
that's what Marvel has become. It's, hey, this celebrity and this bright color and this sound and this other thing. And it's just like, tell me the story. And I actually really like there's a great twist when you learn about Black Adam's origin. And I suddenly cared about him. And the fact that Dr. Fate uses his abilities and they set it up beautifully early on. It wasn't one of these, let's set it up and now I'm going to deliver on it. Like the fact that he's like, I can separate my mind and my body. He explains that. and he is able to communicate with Black Adam to bring him out of captivity. It was a great move. There was heart. There was family. I will say that there was a lot of good family stuff in this, and I honestly, I was pleased with this every time it leaned away from mimicking Marvel. I liked Dr. Fate until he started getting cute about the sarcasm. All that sarcasm stuff seems straight out of Guardians of the Galaxy to me. It's like, I don't need that. But I think if they lean into keeping it grounded, not trying to distract you with bright colors and cameos and all that stuff, and they don't try to be cute with it, we don't need this to be a joke a minute. I'm honestly annoyed by those things, and this didn't do that.
Hey, before we move on, since you said the word, I'm obliged
I know.
to pay
I know.
we have to pay our respects to Dom
I
Toretto.
know.
Your brother never told you never threaten a man's family?
It is kind of ironic how there's Vin Diesel and The Rock, if you know the feud between the two. Yeah, anyway, there's some irony behind the sequence of events there. Anyway, so I'll say this. I liked a lot, because to me, this movie did humor well. Because whereas I think bathos in Marvel movies of late has become very one note and oftentimes misplaced and mistimed, this movie had, those lighter moments of like comic relief, or just
I
there
will
was some
say that.
like,
Yeah.
the best example of this, or not the best, but maybe one of the examples of this would be, because I think the best example is not actually, the best example is not this, but one of the funnier things was, Black Adam trying to learn what sarcasm is, and Dr. Fate and the interaction, where it was a little cringy at times, the way they kind of went about it. I think that could have been executed better, the exchange of dialogue. But the catchphrase thing, and like the kid even mentions, I forgot the
I
name
didn't
of the
like
kid,
any of
Amon
that
or something.
stuff.
He
I
said
didn't like
like,
any of that stuff.
do you remember, like, he said at one point when he's chasing him down the stairs, and he's like, dude, you gotta have a catchphrase, like the superhero industrial complex can do wonders for you, and that
Yeah.
term just got like randomly dropped and forgotten about, and I'm like,
No, I mean,
what?
honestly, the kid pissed me off.
A lot
In
of
some
people didn't
scenes,
like the kid, and I
I
don't
didn't
think
like him at all.
I don't know how much of it had to do with the writing and how much was the acting. I do think they
There's a
could have
little
done
of
a better
both.
job with
Little of
that,
both.
or maybe gone in a different direction, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. I mean, the villain, by the
No,
way, at
here's
the
the
end of the
thing.
movie wasn't the greatest thing ever
I
either, but
I liked what
um,
the kid stood for in terms of Black Adam's story. I thought there's a little bit of a redemption arc in there, and he gets to sort of recreate his lost family, and it's a good character to have in there. I just thought, like, I don't know, if you're a kid watching this and you see that kid, you go, oh, he's got a real enthusiasm for superheroes. Maybe I'll develop an enthusiasm. I see why they did that. Fine.
yeah.
When
Which,
he's, I
speaking of
don't,
which,
I'm kind of done with
yeah,
I'm a kid, but I'm smarter than all the adults thing. Like that's, whatever. But
that
you
yeah, the
can't win them
kid.
all.
I will say that the worst thing about the kid that really annoyed me at times was the thing that he yeah, like you said, he wanted to be like the smartest person in the room, and sometimes the kid was doing stupid things where you were like, it almost felt contrived to get him into trouble so that the movie
Yeah.
had a place to go next, and so it felt a little forced sometimes. And yeah, to that end, I will agree. However, the other point that you just made, I think, is also a very interesting one. So this movie is opening. Wow, actually, I just looked at the Sunday AM update, and it's outperforming its projections. But
Look at that.
I'll start with the international one, because I noticed on the Saturday morning update for this movie, for Black Adam, I'll point out something very specific here. Let me pull it up. So here it is. this movie, they say this, it's a very short line in the article. Anecdotally, we're hearing the family play is stronger than expected. And this is globally for this film. And I think
I
it
buy
has
it.
something to do with the kid being in the movie, because he's really like the entry point for a lot of other kids watching the film, because
For sure.
it's no, really none of the other characters other than maybe the Ammer, the brother of Adriana, who I love. Mo Ammer, the comedian. If you haven't seen this guy do some stand-up comedy, watch him. He's hilarious. I relate to him more so because I too am like an immigrant. Like, I'm a naturalized citizen in the U.S. So I've been through that. I mean, he had to wait years to get his citizenship, so I had a much easier time with that. But I know what it feels like to not be born in the U.S. and kind of have to go through
Sure.
an acclimation period. And a lot of his comedy is based on that. But his character in the movie was a great, like, where I think like he brought a lot of the comic relief, but he also helped ground the movie in a sense of like he felt like a real person I can run into in real life, whereas I think a lot
He
of the
was
JSA and
the
Black Adam
electrician.
didn't. Yes, he was
I
he
love
gets
that
shot in the
character.
abdomen.
Now,
Yeah.
so here's the thing. He was brilliant. His comedic timing was great. He wasn't a celebrity being fed lines. And anytime I laughed at what he said, I did. I was like, that's well placed in someone who's not trying to save the day.
Yeah.
I really liked that it wasn't a superhero making the jokes.
Yes. Well, the Rock tries. Speaking of
I
it
know.
was kind of the whole catchphrase thing that they finally pay off at the end. I was like, okay, I could have done
Yeah.
without it, but I don't mind the whole tell him the Men in Black sent you. And like, I'm like, okay, all right, I'll give it to you. It's The Rock. I'm a fan of The
Well,
Rock as
so
Dwayne
here's the thing.
Johnson, so I'll forgive a
Here's the
lot of those things.
here's the thing that I liked about that. This character, his entire motivation and his entire is like he wants to avenge his son. He misses his son. He wants
Yes.
to be the hero to his son. And that's the whole fiber of this. That's the backbone. That's why he listens to the kid and he protects the kid, because that's the first kid that he comes into contact with, and he feels this. He feels this. What would you call it? I guess a
I don't know,
paternal
this
instinct.
connection maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wants to right the wrong of his past, and that's why he even agrees to take on the powers in the first place. He wants to protect his son, and then he can't. So when he honors, and this is what made all of those things okay for me, when he says, "Oh, this is what the boy wants me to do. He wants me to have a catchphrase. He wants me to be a hero." And I just think that's the dad in him being like, this doesn't matter so much on the grand scheme of things, but I want to get this right for this kid because I couldn't get it right for my kid. That's
Yes. Which I
sobering.
will say the order in which we find out the whole twist about like his origin, that he wasn't the one given the powers by the wizards, but his son gave it. Which, by the way, I think is a departure from the comic book origin, but it was
Is it?
something that I was like, I noticed like, is that the skinny Rock in the beginning of the movie? Because like his silhouette, I was like, that's Skinny Rock. That
Skinny
looks
Rock
like
was
him.
really funny, like
But
one of the
like
funnier
at the
parts.
time, at the time, I sort of assumed what they were going for is like the father of the child is gonna look like the child some way, so maybe like he looks like the Rock too. But then later on, we find out that no, that was the Rock's character. That was Teth Adam, and
Yeah,
I
great twist.
I'm that was I think for me a welcome departure, because it doesn't do anything to fundamentally change who the character of Black Adam is. If anything, it really formed the foundation of the internal conflict of the character, which was like you were talking about in the beginning of the movie. He is somebody, or like when he first is woken up from his prison or his tomb,
Yeah,
he's somebody who believes these powers were a curse and he doesn't deserve them, and that he obviously went out and killed a bunch of people looking for revenge, and he has to
well,
transition
so
from there to an acceptance of like, yes, I can do, not only did fate give me these powers, and fate doesn't, as Dr. Fate says, fate makes no mistakes, or something to
yeah.
that effect. And he also has to realize that vengeance isn't the right thing, and then he had that. So he has to be at peace with himself by the end of the movie before he can finally start to function in the new world that he is waking up in.
You
And
make
to
a lot
me,
of really good
that
points.
was done well. Although they could have spent more time on that internal conflict, I think that's maybe where some of the critics that are not looking at this movie so kindly, they're thinking about, like, I think this movie focused a lot on the surface level action and plot that kept, it was a torrid pace. Like, the movie just kept going, and every other scene was like a fight scene. But I think those critics who were, who were rating this movie really low, I think they wanted to see that internal conflict be externalized a bit more, or be put in front and center a bit more, or be weaved into the overall narrative a little more, because I think it got sidetracked at times until every time we went and back and he's like looking at the statue of his son and reminiscing. Other than those scenes, you sort of like that internal conflict kind of got sidetracked at times. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. You were gonna...
No, I mean, you make a lot of really good points. Thematically, what they've done with superheroes is they said these people are kind of cursed with their abilities. I don't know so much about Hawkman, but like everybody is given these powers or takes on these powers, and that's how fate dies. I'm tired of this, and I can get rid of this curse, and it'll be the right thing for everybody. He's been using it to help people, but he gets to a point where it's too much, and it's the only viable option for him, and he feels a sense of relief. But that contrasted to the Tony Starks of the world, which is like, I'm gonna be powerful, I'm gonna have fun being powerful, everything's kind of a joke, I'm a badass, nothing can really faze me, I'm a superhero, I'll
Billionaire
survive, I'm
playboy.
great.
He was in the Avengers. He's like, take off the suit and what are you? Billionaire playboy philanthropist, which it's pretty. Those are three pretty decent things to have in combination. But still, like,
Sure.
I see what you mean, though.
But I guess there's heart in this. Like there's a character and a story that you can actually care about, and it's not almost every other hero story. Think about every Disney story, most Marvel superheroes. Like, maybe I'll get reamed for saying most. It's like Spider-Man. His parents are dead, and then he loses his uncle, and eventually loses his aunt, and almost all these characters, they start their journeys because they're orphans, and they have to step up and become a hero.
Yes.
This is not that story. This is
sort of the reverse of that story.
It is. It's
like Flashpoint.
It is. It's a lot like Flashpoint. And this is a father trying to not so much avenge his son, but trying to deal with the guilt of having lost his son and feeling responsible and feeling like he should have been more of a protector. But he even walks a fine line between, he has no place in this conflict originally. He just wakes up. And he is morally gray, not because he can't be trusted by either side. It's because he has to learn about what matters. And that's all of that is refreshing and new and different than every other superhero movie, which is, you're the good guy. Don't ask any questions. You're the good guy. There's a bad guy. You have to stop him. Okay, pretty, yep, pretty cut and dry, And this guy he has to figure it out. And he has to learn to trust people and who to trust. But it's, I don't know, it was fun. It was a fun movie. And I liked it a lot more than the last Marvel movie I saw, which was Thor, Love and Thunder.
Here's the thing. This year, the two Marvel movies that have come out in theaters so far, unfortunately, I think they've been rather disappointing, at least for me. Multiverse of Madness was...
I didn't like that either.
Basically a mess.
Yeah.
Thor: Love and Thunder, I had a hell of a good time with in the moment, but then after the fact, it had a really bad aftertaste because you realize that it's very surface level and doesn't really go anywhere. Because ultimately, all you walk away from the movie with is Thor now has a daughter who actually has Chris Hemsworth's daughter in real life. Like, okay, even if you didn't know that though, I mean, I'm all for the whole father-daughter relationship. I always find those to be really fun to see on screen, especially when done well. This movie, by the way, I wanted to just quickly come back to the idea of when they had those humor moments, like this is something that I had so much fun with, and I know you didn't have it because you mentioned it earlier. Noah Centinio's Atom Smasher and then Quintessa Swindell's Cyclone. The chemistry with them, their interactions was just fun because you had like his in the middle of this movie where you have like The Rock playing or Dwayne Johnson playing Teth Adam, who's a super serious dude who's got all this like internal conflict and everything, vengeance, and he doesn't deserve, this is a curse and not a gift and all that stuff. And you have like these mercenaries just like killing people and have these advanced Eternium, which is another MacGuffin metal that material that these movies have now. You have these two people who it just felt like you're watching like an entirely different thing going on, and it could have landed badly for some people, and like I think you didn't take well to it, but like for me,
I just
I really enjoyed the change of pace. Like the best thing about it was like from the beginning you saw that awkward energy, and then you just saw like Noah Centineo. I forget the name, like the Atom Smasher. I forget his like character name, but like he was like clearly like infatuated with this girl. Like they're sitting there talking about how she just like helped heal Moimer's bullet wound with nanotechnology, and she's like he's just trying to like compliment her because he's trying to hit on her yeah, nanotechnology is really cool, and she's like, but you're the one who grows like huge with your atoms. I mean, you're saying nanotechnology. She's like, yeah, no, but nanotechnology is really cool. And then later on, like every time he messes up, like Hawkman's like, you and me later.
I know. I see.
And best, look, hold on. The best part of the movie for me was like the scene where they're like trying to figure out what the text in the crown means. Like life is the only way to death, or death is the only way to life, right? And then he makes this comment of they're trying to figure out what is the correct translation. He's like, well, I think it means life is precious, right? So I think we should like try to preserve life. And he's like doing it in like this very like pointed, like trying to make an impression on the Cyclone character. And then Hawkman just shuts him down. He's like, stop. And I'm like, yeah, that was that could be cringy. I was like, oh, that's funny because it's like that awkward teenage energy going on.
I thought that like you can do that. I felt like it made his character kind of flat to just be the bumbling buffoon of the group, and he's there.
Yeah, they never gave him that moment of like he may be a bumbling buffoon, but he can be useful. He sort of ended up being the bumbling buffoon throughout. Like,
Yeah,
I think bumbling buffoon is a little bit of an exaggeration, but I do see what you mean though.
No, I mean almost every scene that he's in, he's running the wrong way, or he crashes onto, and he's like doesn't know how to talk to people, or it's just like I'm as he's a hero, and I'm like, how am I supposed to have faith in this guy as a hero? And maybe if he comes back for other movies, we'll see him mature and become something, more of a strong hero. But
yeah,
in this, I just found him annoying.
Okay, well, and what did you think about Henry Winkler being the original Atom Smasher and him getting
I like Henry
that
Winkler.
video call? I was like,
I like him.
You know what? I want that Atom Smasher origin story movie now, and I want to. They should de-age Henry Winkler, and I will watch that movie.
No, they should not.
I don't know.
They absolutely should not.
I would, dude. I would honestly like Dr. Fate. Give me that like World War I or World War II movie where Dr. Fate is like this guy's young, and he first gets his powers.
I don't need it.
I'd be there for it.
Really, that was my favorite thing about Dr. Fate. He's in. He's great. He's gone. I don't need the full, backstory. Like, it's suggested. And I like to imagine that it's Pierce Brosnan as a young man. I don't want to cast somebody else. I don't want to pull an Obi-Wan on these guys and just drag out a story with a lot of CG. I'm not interested. He served a narrative purpose here, and he carried out his mission beautifully. We're done. We're done.
Sure. I mean, the helmet is going to eventually choose somebody else, so I guess the character of Dr. Fate will be around. But it was kind of, to me, it was honestly a little bittersweet seeing that they have Pierce Brosnan, like, finally in one of these roles, and he did a fantastic job, and then, his character dies. Again, serving a purpose. The one thing that this is something that we can touch on briefly, that relationship between Hawkman and Dr. Fate, I think, was left a little underdeveloped. They could have used a few extra scenes, maybe flashback once or twice, or maybe give them more of a connection than they're just like old ancient friends. Because then when
I
you see that moment where Dr. Fate decides to sacrifice himself because he's like, this is the way it has to be, and he locks out Hawkman, I personally had a hard time connecting to Hawkman's, grief in that moment, because up until that point, the only thing they've done is just tell us through dialogue that they're these old acquaintances and, these long time friends. And I wish I could have gotten a little more context to feel more of an emotional gravitas behind
well,
Dr. Fate's action in the third
I
act.
personally didn't need that, but I do think this isn't the last of Hawkman that we're going to see.
No,
You know,
no.
moving
I think there's a lot
actually,
more you can do with him. His
there's a lot more
character.
you can do with
There's a
all of these
prequel
characters.
comic for this movie with this entirely like an adventure of Hawkman and how he's like sort of like a Tony Stark-esque character in this world, and
Is it?
it's all nanotech based armor, and he had his original armor that was not nanotech in like a glass uh display on the plane. At one point he looks back on it, and everything he does now is nanotech. His character is really cool. Aldous Hodge is a great casting choice for the role too.
I liked
So,
him. I liked
yeah.
him. But I think as this moves forward, and we've gotten a lot of indications that this movie is leading to some more development of the DCEU. So we'll probably see more of Hawkman. We may get some more dialogue. We may get those flashbacks. We might learn more about things Dr. Fate did. Who knows? Maybe they've already filmed stuff with Pierce Brosnan that they're going to put into other movies as just like, here's something else that he did. We don't know. We don't know.
Possibly. I mean, if you look at I threw this up earlier in the segment, but again, we're doing this show on a Sunday, and so this is the latest. These are the latest numbers, and in worldwide, this right now is tracking for $140 million worldwide debut in the opening weekend. Yesterday, and even coming into the weekend, they were looking at closer to like 120, 130, somewhere in that range. So clearly it's overperforming, which is great to see. And not only that, but domestically, the initial projections when it first started tracking was like around 70 to 75 million. And then that number dropped going into this weekend to like 60 to 62. And now it's looking like it's coming in at 67. It's not a huge like jump up from the expected, but it is overperforming like the tracking going into the weekend. And $140 million debut, even if it has a big drop off, as a lot of these movies do because they're front loaded at the box office, I do believe this movie is going to make enough money. It has to make 500 to 600 million to more than break even and give them enough of a profit to justify a sequel, direct sequel. But I guarantee you, even if it's not a direct sequel, there will be a sequel. The Rock didn't sign up for one movie, and the post-credit scene only hints at what's to come, which we will talk about more later. But the point I was trying to make, this movie is off to a great start. And
I'd say
just
so.
very quickly, because I pulled this up earlier, we talked about it briefly, the idea that, the critics really slammed this movie, but you look at the audience score. I mean, the critic score is down to 40% with 214 reviews, but with 2,500 plus audience reviews, it's sitting at a 90%. Clearly, people are loving this movie. I don't know how good the word of mouth is and how strong it is, but the 90% has to indicate that there's going to be people going to watch this multiple times, which will help the box office. So I think that's all good stuff.
I think the critics sort of let a touch on this one, and it's nice that people are embracing the themes that they are, and I'm optimistic for DC right now.
Yeah. I mean, this movie wasn't exactly like the Dark Knight level kind of a movie, which kind of leaves you with a lot of thought-provoking ideas at the end of the movie. But what it does do, I felt like I've noticed people said like it felt like some people have reviewed it as like a 90s action movie where it was you're there for the thrill of the ride, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. It didn't necessarily leave you like with a new perspective on life or the world around you after the fact.
Oh, but the thing is, you can find it in this.
Right, there
It's
are
not
things.
absent.
It's not the central focus. I feel like these days we have gotten used to like superhero movies having that role in our society because superhero movies dominate so much of our movie-going experience that they now also have to be the kind of movies that make you rethink your perspective on the world as a whole and have that be the
Nothing
centerpiece
wrong with a little
of the
substance
film.
in anything.
Yeah.
In anything.
But the one thing I will say about this movie, I felt like some people, like some of the reviews I've read from the critics at least, I felt like people felt like betrayed. Like those critics were like they were going in for one thing, and they got something entirely different. Whereas I thought this movie was earnestly everything. It never pretended to be something that it wasn't, and from beginning to end, it fully was like, this is an action heavy movie that has got it touches upon some interesting ideas of like, does the GSA have jurisdiction in Kondak? What were they doing for the last 27 years that the mercenaries have been, oppressing the people of Kondak? Why are they only showing up to take on black? Like the whole, like, there's some like moral and ethical questions that it asks, but doesn't truly address or doesn't do it cleverly. So I think the writing is lacking a little bit by today's superhero movie standards. However, I still don't think this movie's. Here's the thing. I made this comparison yesterday walking out of the theater, and I told my brother, I'm like, look, this movie may not have been like an Oscar-worthy screenplay that it was based on. However, the one cardinal sin that it didn't do was it had a bad script, or like a lacking script, but was also boring to watch, which I think was basically Eternals. It was badly scripted, badly edited and shot, and I think a lot of flat compositions and stuff in terms of cinematography, and it was boring to watch.
Yeah.
This movie was a hell of a lot of fun to watch, and I think that alone, your mileage may vary with the writing and the script and all the other stuff, but I think the fact that this was an entertaining watch is all that you really need to know, because if you can sit through this movie and the time just flies by, isn't that like a lot of what we really want from movies? Is this like reprieve from the daily life that we, all of our life's problems, just to go and have some fun and kind of, have this little oasis to go to? I think that, to me, is very valuable. And to that end, I very much look forward to watching this movie again very soon.
So the thing is, we're left with some more questions, right, at the end of this movie, because we have that post-credit scene.
Yeah.
Which that's
Yes.
another.
Oh man, yeah. I was
That's
smiling
another
year
thing
to
that-
year. I was
Actually,
just
you know
sitting
what?
there, and like slowly the smile just like I just noticed. Oh my god, I'm smiling. Like by the time that scene ended, yeah.
I'll be honest here. I am not a big Henry Cavill Superman fan.
Yeah.
Cavill. I think, I tried to give Man of Steel a shot. I wanted it to be something like The Dark Knight. I think it got very close. I would have edited it differently. And
Yeah, we have different opinions on that, but
I know.
yes.
However, I really, really liked seeing Superman in the post-credit scene. I'm excited for it, because I don't know if it was just to see the costume come out of the shadows was such a... I got chills just saying that just now, and in the theater for sure. But like,
And I swear they milked that moment for like 3 seconds longer. I'm like,
I
how
know.
much smoke is he walking through? Get him out here already. I mean, that moment is like, it's one of those things where your brain just slows down because it's taking it in, so it feels like it's longer than it probably actually was.
Yeah.
But
like,
I
I think
took that in.
I think the country, I think the world is ready for Superman.
And he even had the little curl thing, the classic
I know.
Superman curl. Yeah.
He
he's
felt
jacked,
more
as
like
always.
classic Superman than he has in any other movie. So I'll give him another shot. I'm on board. I'm ready for it. Show me Superman. Make us fall in love with Superman again. I am so there. Because I think we could use a straight, like, not like just a morally 100% good guy. We could use a guy who's not an anti-hero, who's not morally gray, who's not shifting around. He's got a clear, like, he's not a flawed man. We know this. He makes mistakes, but it's not the story of every anti-hero here. I'm glad to see Superman. I'm excited.
The one thing that did, like, I think in this movie they go out of their way like 5 or 6 times at least, where The Rock is like, "I'm not a hero," like that line.
Yeah.
I was like, I get it, like at one point. And then the whole thing about him, I'm like, they waited like 20 minutes or 30 minutes way too long to address the fact that he keeps going through walls. And they're like, we have doors, right? And then he just like, yeah, we had doors in my time. That's how we went into rooms. I'm like, okay, I'm glad we are on the same page. Anyway, but like,
That was funny.
there's stuff like that
was
was why this movie was fun. But like the Henry Cavill thing, yeah, look, honestly, here's what it comes down to. If you were to tell me, like, in 1999, when I was, like, soaking up the greatness of Batman Beyond on VHS tapes and VCDs and whatever, that the superhero genre would take over movies, like the way they have today, and Superman, over the course of, let's say, from 2008 to 2022, the golden age of superhero movies, that Superman in that entire time would have only one solo movie, I would be like, I'm sorry, what? I understand that maybe Batman has had like, half a dozen more, whatever, but Batman is a popular character, or like Spider-Man has had like 5 or 6 appearances, and so on and so forth. But I'm like, Superman has to be in there. And I know he's been in Batman versus Superman and Justice League, both versions of it, and even made cameos.
He's taken a real back seat.
But yeah, it's about time that the OG superhero that every other superhero since has been somewhat inspired by and based on almost, to take his rightful place at the top of the mountain. And I think
it's going to be a tall order for whoever directs it and whoever writes it, because
we'll talk about this later in the show when we talk about like the plans that there was an article out in Hollywood Reporter, and I'll pull it up when we talk about this, where there were apparently it's a lot more than just one cameo that they shot, like I think which was as recent as September that they did this in secret around Labor Day weekend. But Henry Cavill isn't back to just be in one post-credit scene. So I'll leave it at that for now if you haven't read about it already, but we will talk about that in more detail when we get to the state of the DCEU coming up later in the show.
In the meantime, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe, be commenting, and do all that stuff. Be a good little person on the other side of the screen there. We appreciate everybody who's part of this movie fan community, and we're just fans, so why don't you be part of the conversation? We want this to be a two-way street. Okie dokie, like and subscribe, let us know what you think. And on to the next thing. Oh yeah, this is actually really good. We got to talk to Gildart Jackson, who is a voice actor behind the new Alfred character in Gotham Knights. This is different than what we normally do, but it'll give you a bit of insight into the video game world for actors. It's pretty fun. Okay, the game is Gotham Knights. The man was Batman. He's no longer there. And the butler is Alfred.
And he is still a part of it.
He is still a part of it, and Alfred is, in this game, in this reality, he's Gildart Jackson. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Andrew. How are you?
Pretty great. Pretty wonderful.
Good.
How about you?
Really, really good, and excited that soon Gotham Knights is going to be coming out. Actually, I think did it get released? What is the release date? I think it's got two weeks to go, I think.
By the time this is out, maybe. Who knows?
By the time this is out.
Maybe. But for everybody watching now, we got to him first.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So this is a neat game because, as you said, we are experiencing Gotham post-Batman. So tell me about that world. What's that like?
Well, the truth is I don't really know. I mean, I've seen it. So the story of my involvement with Gotham Knights is a little convoluted, and I'm happy to tell you if you're interested in.
That's why we're here.
So, maybe 2 and a bit years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I had an audition, and I got cast in this game, which at the time was very hush-hush. They called it something else. And I didn't even know what I was auditioning for. And there were several auditions. And the final one was in LA with a bunch of people. And then I heard that I got it, and then I heard that it was the new Batman game.
That means that when you auditioned for this, you didn't know you were trying to be Alfred.
No, right? I was trying to be a butler. But as every butler, I've played a butler on many occasions, and every time I just try to be Jeeves in Jeeves and Wooster, and evidently that sold them that I was suitable for being Alfred as well as Jeeves.
It's impressive. I mean, if you're gonna play a butler, I feel like Alfred is, that's the one that you want to get.
Yeah, it was a very fun part to get. So, and I had played a butler in a TV show on ABC, a reality show. I was the fictional host called Giles the Butler.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Room Manor. My name is Giles.
So I played a butler many, many times, and the role was a motion capture job, meaning that everything be shot in this huge studio where there are hundreds of cameras, and you wear a funny suit, and the cameras pick up the suit, and then they turn it into who you are. And it's all very strange because So the first time I did it, they decided I'm quite tall, and they decided that Alfred would be quite small. And so you film the scene, and then you immediately see it in playback up as the characters. It is not all composited, but you do get to see it. And whereas I was quite a lot taller than everybody else in the scene when we were doing it, suddenly my character was smaller than everyone. It was amazing.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So,
and part of that, you mentioned having to wear this suit, and that's got to be a little disorienting. It fits in all kinds of weird places. It looks like nothing else, and you're there trying to. Part of the acting is like you're pretending this is a tuxedo. You're moving around. Does that change? Because some actors, the costume really gets them into character. Is that something that got in the way, or did it even faze you?
Well, I am one of those actors who like to be wearing the clothes and have the additional things that inform the characterization. But I think mostly it's the way I walk and move that informs me as an actor. And so it actually was quite fun because it was all, you had to imagine everything. But I think if my scenes hadn't been with the other actors, that would have been more difficult. I like to act with the other people. So as opposed to if it was some, so I've done a little bit of that on various shows where you have to act with nothing. And that is quite hard for me. But the reality is that I didn't have enough time to do this job in that way because along came COVID. And after the first time that we were in the motion capture studio up in Montreal, and there were to be 18 different shoots. And so we did the first one, then COVID hit, and we couldn't get into Canada anymore. So they had to cast all of the movement part with local actors from Montreal. And then I voiced what they had done. It made the job a lot more more difficult because
as you've just said, like it's easier. It's easier when you can act and react to people in the environment around you, and suddenly you're back in a booth having to imagine it all.
Well, you get to see it because a lot of it was put together, but the difficult part was the other actor had made choices, which we all do, and said the lines in certain ways, and he wasn't English. So it made it quite hard to, because just the way different people deliver lines is different, and
sure,
I had to match his intonation and the way he presented the line, which wasn't bad. It was just different in the way I would.
It's another constraint, something else
Right,
to
right.
mix things up.
Something, but maybe most of all, I was just bummed that I didn't get to do, because we had a lot of fun. It was really fun interacting with the other actors. I liked them all a lot, and that was the only time I ever met them, sadly. So we didn't have all that fun of doing the game together. But
tell me about Alfred as a character, because you're not just being yourself. As you said, you were putting on a character, and there's a quality to him that makes him Alfred. There's something consistent. What do you think that is?
Well, I think perhaps that it is also the quality that makes me get cast in these roles. Butlers are inherently sort of protectors. They not in the protecting way that Batman would beat everybody up and protect them. Sort of more paternal, making sure everything is okay for them. And I think it's just a sort of tenor that some people have. That's what they do, and it just happens to be, I think, probably the thing that I'm best at. It's not a fantasy that people want to live, to be brought up by a butler, but it is, he's a lovely guy who is always steering you in the right direction. You have no parents, and there isn't the animosity that we all at a certain sort of stages in our life, teenage years, have with parents, or frequently do. And he saves him. There's a love. It's a different kind of relationship than most people have, and yet it is one that I think we can all imagine and wish for, if tragedy struck, to have somebody come and step in to do that job.
Why do we force? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
In the game, Batman has died. Right. There are 4 different characters that have now taken over what his job used to be. One of them is Robin, Batgirl, Red Hood, and Nightwing. And you can play all of those characters. You can sort of play the game as any one of those 4. You can't play the game as Alfred. He is at the hub where everybody comes back, and there are these interstitial animatics or little movies that take place when you finish a certain part of the game, and you go back, and Alfred has a scene with one or all of the characters, and then you move off and you play some more.
So can you tell me about that relationship? Because that's got to be different than talking to Batman. Now you're talking to Batman's disciples.
Right.
Is it still a protector, paternal type of relationship?
It is, but with different emphasis, and all the characters have different qualities.
Sure.
And Alfred is there to sort of bolster them all up. Some of them want to quit. Some of them, feel like they can't do it, and they all need help. But in a way, Alfred is able to open his tool chest a little bit deeper and sort of help this person in one way, Robin in another, Batgirl in another, and he not only knows about everybody, and not everybody is known about by all the others, but he also he knows about Batman. He knows he worked so intimately with Batman for so many years that he knows what Batman would do in this situation. And sometimes the young saviors, the Gotham Knights, they get it wrong, and they have to be steered in another direction.
So way into the future, I don't know where this game ends and where it puts all the characters, but should we expect more Gotham exploration into the future like this, where there is no Batman?
I hope so. I hope so, because that would mean that we would get to do the game again, but in the way it was intended to be done in the first place. It takes a long time, and it took an especially long time because of COVID, to make these games. I mean, it's an amazing piece of industry to put this together. My part is tiny in comparison to the people who actually made it a game that you can play. If we're lucky, we'll get to do it once or twice more, and I hope we do.
I hope you do too. I mean,
Yeah.
you're somebody who brings an intensity and a real a groundedness to just about everything I've seen you in. I've seen you in plays, some television parts, short films. You do a lot. Is there anything now that you're excited to, tell people about that you're working on?
Yeah, there are lots of things actually. I'm quite lucky that way. I just got cast in a new Zack Snyder movie.
Really?
For Netflix. As with everything, I don't know quite how how much I can talk about it. So anyway, that's happening. And the thing I'm most excited about, really, that I do at the moment, is I do a daily reading called Fireside Reading. Every day at 5 o'clock, I sit in front of the fire, and on Instagram at Fireside Reading, I read a book, an old book. I've done many, many, many audiobooks, and I read an old book to anybody who might like to join. And I started this as the Batman story is really, COVID and messed it up for me. But Fireside Reading is the opposite of that. It was a little bit of joy that happened as a result of COVID. Right after the lockdown, I started doing this Fireside Reading. I did it because I imagined, my mother sadly now is gone, but if she was at home in England in her little house, she'd have been incredibly lonely because she was 90, and what would she have gotten up to? And I thought, well, she didn't love TV, but she loved to listen to the radio. She would have loved to have a live audio book of a sort of feed in front of the fire if we could have worked out how to get her on Instagram. And so I thought, well, why don't I just start doing this? And unbelievably, 2.5 years later, I'm still doing it every day at 5. And it's grown in other ways. One of the audiobook companies that I work with heard about it, liked it, and said, why don't we do some other books sort of professionally? The daily read is just me and my iPhone, but professionally with the proper camera and proper crew and edited, but the same idea, a wonderful book read to you by me in front of the fire. And we made 16 of these things. Mostly they're children's books, so like Peter Pan and Winnie the Pooh and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And the idea for the kids, why we gravitated toward these kids' books, is that these are books that you really would like your kid to read. Like Peter Pan is just such a wonderful book. And but it's long. It's 6.5 hours long. So yeah. It's quite an undertaking, and I know I'm a dad, and I went through the age when the kids wanted to watch TV, and there's a lot of stuff that they can watch which I personally didn't really want them to watch at that age. Just stuff that was a little too violent, a little too selling them something.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get them something very simple. If ever my wife and I just needed a break, something very simple to watch. And it was very hard then, maybe easier now. Well, now you can get Fireside Readings, but it was very hard then to find something which was just benign and sweet, and yet sit any kid in front of the screen and they're kind of captivated, even if it's just a picture of a guy reading a story. So I've heard wonderful things about this and about my Fireside Readings vis-a-vis children watching it. They really enjoy it, and that is so gratifying, that because they enjoy it really because these books are unbelievably good. They've been around for 100 years for a reason.
Sure.
And they just are captivating. Albert Einstein apparently once said, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be really intelligent, read them lots of fairy tales, because they give the reader, or in this case, the listener, the opportunity to imagine. And imagination is such an important part of our life that is, in a way, taken away by the movies and TV. It's all given to us. Whereas if we go into our brain, we can have these stories and act them out for ourselves. And that's, I'm not saying that any, I love movies, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is another thing, and especially when kids are young.
How can people be a guest into your imagination? Where can they find you?
They can go to firesidereading.com. There is there are links there that take you to the books that the highly produced books that we're talking about. And they also take you to Instagram, and there are several books up on YouTube, and there's even a podcast. So it's sort of a hub that can send you off in any direction you want, depending on what piece of entertainment you want to.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot that we can, be entertained with from you. So if you're watching this now, keep an eye out for Gildart Jackson, maybe in a Zack Snyder movie. And certainly in Gotham Knights. A lot of really great stuff. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us today. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing all that you do.
Okay, good, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Well, with the box office success of Black Adam and the reorienting of Discovery Warner Bros., now the DCEU has an opportunity to reform its brand and reintroduce itself to the world. We've been interested in this for a long time, but now we're starting to see some of the pieces of the puzzle come together. First with this cutscene at the end of the credits of Black Adam, where Superman makes an appearance, and it's Henry Cavill, so he's back. He's interacting with Black Adam. We have a whole wealth of possibilities in terms of what can be done with the Justice Society, the Justice League, and we're starting to see some really interesting players get involved here. Let's just start with generally, what do you want to see from DC?
Well, if you're asking me, I know we sort of already spoiled it, but yeah, I mean, it's an open secret. It's not even a secret. Superman, Henry Cavill's Superman specifically, is back in Black Adam, and it's his first appearance, I believe. I know he was in 2021's Zack Snyder's Justice League, but they were just using footage that was shot before. And the last time we truly had him on a project with DC as Superman was in 2017 in the theatrical version of the Justice League. So it's been like a good half decade now since we have seen Henry Cavill in the role. He always said the cape was in the closet, and I'll be honest with you, I think he has been the best on-screen portrayal of Superman ever. And I know a lot of people will point to Christopher Reeve as that example. I personally think his take, albeit very admirable and great for the time, doesn't quite age well with what we have today and what we expect a Superman character and the character depth and everything, the nuance with which you got to portray. Because here's the thing, it's very difficult to portray a practically immortal and what would you call it, like invincible, perfect human being. There's no such thing. I mean, he's not a human, but like, you know what I mean, like a character. Yeah. You need certain character flaws. There's otherwise, like, there's no point of you can't make a movie or tell a story about somebody who's perfect in every which way. So I think to that I think the Henry Cavill portrayal is better.
I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna push back there. You can and you should, and it's
how?
Really how? I'll tell you how, because we have no real role models these days. There's nobody out there, there's no character really that you can point to and say, I would do everything just like that if I could. And when you have all the powers and you are invincible and you're intelligent, that forces you to reflect on your abilities, use them for good, do the best you can. And it's not like Superman. It's not like Superman actually succeeds all the time. You know, everybody comes up against challenges, but this is what you do if you're all powerful, if you're all good. And really, who else can you point to today who is all good and who is all powerful? There's really nobody that we're seeing, and it would be a really cool thing. You could easily.
But isn't it a little
critique
unrealistic
Superman.
though? I mean, even
Aren't superheroes a little unrealistic?
Well, I know, but what I see. But here's the thing: if you're trying to make these movies grounded, right? Then even we all have role models in our lives, and we you and I have. I'm sure we have had role models in our lives that we have looked up to, still do. But we know they're not perfect people. Like everybody, they all have, some internal struggle
Sure.
that they are having to deal with and have dealt with their entire lives, or now, or in the past, or will do in the future, and that affects their decision making and how they go about living their life and the decisions they make. So, I think to me, it's only fair that you show a side of that to Superman, because you can't show him as this, this prophetically all good, pure force. Now, here's the thing. I do appreciate a character for example, on the Jack Ryan character, especially John Krasinski's interpretation on Amazon Prime. He's that kind of a character, like a throwback almost, where he will always do the right thing and has that moral compass. And Chris Evans' Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe had that kind of a role as well. He always was we have to find a better way to do this. There's a right way to do things, and that's how Civil War and the whole conflict of Civil War is kind of centered around Captain America saying, if I see a situation pointed south, I can't look the other way. And I think that's the version of Superman that Zack Snyder, and again, I'm defending, I guess, Zack Snyder's work here, but through Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and Justice League, at least according to him, he said that he wanted to take Superman on a journey from being just living a life of every other human, or trying to do that for the majority of his life up until he comes out to the world as the Superman. He had to then adjust from being the expectation of the world of him was just as in Clark Kent to being as the Superman, which obviously means a lot more than just what Clark Kent means to the world.
I liked what Snyder did with his upbringing a lot. And it's not that, because a kid who's going through this stuff is going to have those emotions, and he's going to have those experiences, and that was a wonderful way of grounding it. And I don't dislike Man of Steel. I just think there's some things I would have done differently. I really appreciate the attention to detail and the thought that went into crafting this version of the story and thinking out the details of some things that we probably glossed over in other versions of Superman. So I'm not going to tell you that, I think Man of Steel was bad. I don't. I just want to see, really, I just want to see Superman. I love Superman.
I mean, who doesn't? I think it's
Well, I think a lot of people critique him as being flat and uninteresting, and it's boring to tell a story about somebody who's all powerful and perfect, and it's just you raise the stakes and you make them relatable. But I think it'd be great to have some role model superheroes out there who are just doing the best they can and are demonstrating this is the best that can be done. I mean, that's part of it. I guess that's also what bugs me about the bumbling Atom Smasher. Clearly he's going to learn and he'll be better, and we're seeing a human side to him. But if you're going to be a hero, and you're going to take responsibility for your powers and for other people, you want to be able to trust them and you want to be able to look up to them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I don't agree on your. I still think the critique of Atom Smasher. I enjoyed that interpretation in Black
And
Adam.
people will. They're welcome to.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the journey that the Henry Cavill Superman and Clark Kent go on from the beginning of Man of Steel all the way to his last appearance in the Justice League, you kind of see him like basically he's got this like Jesus, I mean, it's on purpose. It's like this Jesuit, is that would that be the word? Kind of journey. Like there's a lot of imagery of the, like he goes up to the sun and like with his arms out and like this
Oh
cross
yeah,
shape,
but
and
you know what? That's
he
in
dies and he's
everything.
reborn, and they obviously lean into that. But from a character standpoint, you go from this, like I said, I think this is maybe the right way or the best way to look at the situation is Clark Kent had to adjust from being just Clark Kent to being the Superman, and the expectations that the world have of Clark Kent and of Superman are two very different things. And the irony there is, though, the two things are they're one and the same person, and that person now has to deal with the idea that he has to hold himself to a higher standard because the rest of the world does, and regardless of whether that's fair to him or not.
That's an
And
interesting
his
way
journey
in.
that he takes, I think, is a great way to get him from point A to point B. And I think Zack Snyder, as a director, did a pretty good job with that. But again, we're talking about the past.
I think that's what's I know, and we'll move on. But I think that's what's missing from a lot of heroes is like, because he recognizes that people have these expectations of him, that's where he gets that sense of responsibility, and that's why he has to be perfect. There's a conflict there. That's an interesting character, a perfectionist who feels that everybody's counting on him. That's good. We can buy into that. We can relate to that. But let's get off Superman for a little bit, and let's take a 10,000-foot view of this thing and see, like, what is the DCEU going to be? And what they've said is they don't want to just repeat or compete with Marvel. They want to be something.
That's what The Rock keeps saying. He's like, you don't have to be Marvel. Like, there's only one Black Adam. He didn't say exactly this, but he said something to the effect that there's only one Black Adam. There's only one Superman. We are us. We are not trying to be Marvel. We're trying to do the best that we can be, which is basically like, hey, there's no better way of saying that. Like, regardless of whether your intent is that or not, that is the way to go. At least, like, you don't want to try to cut, because Marvel, at the peak of its prime, I believe, like they would call it phase 2. I think to this day, the best year of the MCU, I think, was 2014, when they had the first Guardians of the Galaxy come out and Captain America: The Winter Soldier come out. I think in terms of overall quality of MCU movies, that year was probably the best year to date. And around that time, Warner Brothers' active strategy was to try to catch up with Marvel as fast as it could, trying to do as much as what the Marvel was doing, which is part of the reason why they fired Zack Snyder or let him go, or like really pivot away from his vision, because his vision was really nothing to do with like what Marvel Cinematic Universe was all about. Now today, I think the picture looks very different. And there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter this week where it was an exclusive, and they talked about, hey, DC is at a turning point. And it seems like they were sitting on a lot of this information for a while, but now that Black Adam's coming out, Dwayne Johnson's showing up everywhere that he possibly can, from movie theaters to late night shows to premieres. He is like working 24/7 overtime to promote this movie.
Yeah.
They use this as an opportunity to do this huge dump of information where they're talking about how James Gunn is pitching new movies. He's already working on season 2 of Peacemaker. He's got a secret movie that he's working on. Dwayne Johnson has expressed his interest as being like potentially an advisor to the DCEU, rather than being like the new Kevin Feige of the DCEU. There's a power vacuum, because right now Walter Hamada this week finally, he packed up his office and he officially left the Warner Brothers lot after being with the studio for a long time. Before he was in charge of DC Films, he was at New Line Cinema, and then he became charge of that. Although he was never truly given like the power to lead on his own. He was always part of a committee, so he was undermined along the way. But hey, he's one of the producers on Black Adam, so you could give him credit for a lot of what they've done in recent years. But he's left, and they haven't found his replacement, that new Kevin Feige that David Zaslav wants for Warner Brothers Discovery to install as the new chief of DC Films and give DC Films its own like umbrella like Marvel Studio does. So in that power vacuum, you've got like Matt Reeves signed a new overall deal with the studio recently, so he's developing his Batman universe of movies, including apparently some solo villain-based movies in addition to the Penguin show on HBO Max, and obviously the trilogy of they're writing Batman 2 now, the Batman 2, I guess, the sequel to the 700 something plus $1 million grossing Batman for Robert Pattinson. And on top of all of that, you still have the movies that have already been produced or in post-production now, with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom coming out next year, The Flash coming out next year, Blue Beetle coming out theatrically, which was originally meant to be on HBO Max next year. They've
What's
also,
the latest?
I think,
with
got
the
Wonder Woman
Flash?
3 in development. So, yeah.
Because Ezra Miller, I think they said he could do up to 26 years in jail.
It's potentially, yes, if he gets convicted for that. I think he pleaded non-guilty, but obviously that's like the first step to whatever process they have to go through in court. But
Are they recasting him, or they're just gonna make that movie with him, huh? Or
that
they've
movie's
made it?
already done. The movie was,
Eesh.
I think the movie was in the can like almost a year ago at this point. They've been in post-production, and this summer they did reshoots, which is a normal part of these movies that these days they plan for it before the movie starts production. So they did reshoots. I think they were as recently as last month doing some pickup shots. And so he's still, I mean, it's too late to recast him for this particular movie unless they
know.
want to spend
It
$100+
would.
million doing it. But
I
moving
would love.
forward,
I would
I
love a new
don't think they're
Flash.
gonna bring him back. I just don't see that
They'd be
happening.
nuts
There's too
to.
much of a risk.
They'd be nuts too. And also, like, his portrayal changes so many things about the Flash. And the Flash was my favorite superhero growing up. So it's I don't know. Like, I've been disappointed with how the Flash has been treated in most things. The animation treats him pretty well, and it would be cool to see a more classic Flash come back. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I like the I'm blanking on his name, the TV version, the Grant Gustin version of the Flash. I thought that was he was a great Flash, but I don't think you can really translate that to the movies, even though there's probably he may make a cameo because Ezra Miller made a cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover in the Arrowverse on CW, so maybe
Yeah.
they'll just
Well,
to
okay,
kinda
but
even
that's
scales.
another problem with DC is that their animation is completely separate from their live action.
By the way,
Their
did you hear
TV,
Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers are merging? This week it was in the news. They're
they've
merging the two units.
they've been connected for a long time,
Yeah, but they're
they're
still
actually
operationally
merging.
were separate. So they're
Mhm.
probably gonna let go of a lot of people who have the same roles, like in teams where there's overlap. But as far as from a creative standpoint, yeah, they're merging into like one thing now, which
Interesting.
there was separation there because I think Warner Brothers animation mostly focused on features. But anyway, the point being, you mentioned like in DC they do a lot of live
So,
action and
well,
animation.
the thing is,
separately.
the continuities are separate. The TV generally connects to the other TV. Sometimes those actors voice the characters in the animation, but they're playing different versions of the character, or very, very slightly off versions of that character. So it's not as interconnected and interwoven as the MCU, where every property, like She-Hulk, as bad as it is part of the MCU. It's woven in there with all the same mythology and the same actors playing the same characters. We don't have that consistency with DC, but the fact that they're even touting the name DCEU, or is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, the
Is
DC
that right?
Extended Universe. That's been a term that's
Extended
been around
universe.
for like, I think
Yeah.
since the Comic-Con in 2014 almost, when they first announced the sequel to Man of Steel was going to be a Batman v Superman movie.
So it seems like they're inching toward more interconnectivity, which I think they should, because that's part of Marvel's strategy that has worked, and it gets people into the theaters and
Yeah.
more engaged.
I mean, they had Amanda
because-
Waller in Black Adam, which was a connecting. They even had one of her agents who plays like a key role in Peacemaker, who actually recently I forget her name. She and James Gunn had been dating for a while, and they finally got married. So there's connections there. Like the two of those
Yeah.
characters were directly connected to Peacemaker, were in Black Adam. I've heard that they've also shot some cameos for some of these upcoming movies next year. So there's definitely and much greater effort being put in to connect the dots actively.
Yeah, I think that's a smart move, but at the same time, like, because they don't have a track record of keeping everything canonically consistent, they do have an opportunity now to start, and they can recast anybody. It's interesting that they've gone with Cavill again as Superman. Like I said, I'm on board for it. But everything else, you could start over. It'd be okay. Be okay with me.
Hey, I'm a big fan of. Okay, my favorite Batman is Christian Bale's Batman, The Dark Knight from the Dark
Yeah.
Knight trilogy. And having said that, though, I think Ben Affleck's Batman is great. Like the action sequences, especially in Batman v Superman, like the warehouse fight scene, probably the best Batman fight scene put to screen. And well, yes, we now have the Robert Pattinson version of Batman out there, and we're gonna have Michael Keaton's version of Batman in Flashpoint in addition to Ben Affleck's. So I don't know where the Batman character is headed ultimately in terms of how they want to treat Ben Affleck's version of the character, who is like the native of the DCEU version of Batman, right? But I like Gal Gadot in the role. I think Jason Momoa is fantastic. He's got such. I mean, the dude is like got charisma, like he drips charisma like sweat. He's great in the Aquaman role, and
He's good.
I love
like
him from
him.
all the way back in Stargate Atlantis. That's where Ronan. For anyway, I like a lot of the casting choices they've made, especially I mean a lot of these are Zack Snyder era casting choices. I think Ezra Miller's probably the exception to the rule, and
Yeah.
given what has happened over the course of the last year or 2 years, I highly doubt they're gonna like take a chance on him with another project after this Flash movie comes out. So yeah, they might just simply recast him and we get one of those Don Cheadle as Brody moments where he's like, I'm here to deal with it, or is moving on. Like like it's just, you don't have to do some convoluted like plot thing to like we're recasting Flash.
No.
Just a new actor
you
pops
could-
in the
or
next
you could
movie
just-
and he's the Flash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could make that movie, and we'll see how it does. I mean, I can't imagine it will do fantastically.
Well, I mean, we have to first see like how this first one's gonna do.
That's
A
what I'm
movie,
saying.
by the way. Get this. I don't know if you've heard of this statistic, but The Flash, the TV show, debuted the same year that on CW that they announced The Flash the movie. And The Flash the movie is gonna come out next summer, right? I think it's a few weeks or maybe a couple of months after The Flash the TV show completes its 9-season run on the CW. Meaning The Flash the TV show has gone through 9 seasons, 9 years on TV, and has went from like airing its premiere all the ways to its finale. And it took that long for them to take The Flash the movie, which had many directors popping in and out, and we didn't know what the movie was going to be for a while. They had multiple scripts, and they trashed them and started again.
Yeah,
But it took them 9 years to bring this to screen. Black Adam had been in development for over a decade, and finally here. So I certainly think one of the things that DCU has to do moving forward as part of this like new 10-year plan, but also as a general like point of like if you want to compete with Marvel on any level, then you need to I'm not saying become like a factory, like a machine, because I think that implies that you're sacrificing quality for quantity, but the one thing you have to admit that Kevin Feige runs a very tight ship over there at Marvel. Like it's efficient. I mean, they may not get it right every time, and of late they may be off. If you don't like Phase 4, I haven't enjoyed Phase 4 in particular, but it feels like they're finally getting to the point where quantity is becoming more of a factor than quality. However, for the majority of the MCU's existence, quality has always been pretty good, and I think DC's record could be better overall. I'm not saying everything has to be a home run out of the park. You can get a couple of RBIs, a couple of strikes here and there, whatever. You're not going to hit on every ball, but you need to have overall a good batting average. And I think the batting average, to use again a baseball reference and analogy that I'm on, their batting average has simply not been good enough of late. Of the last since the Dark Knight trilogy finished in 2012, I think the last 10 years DC has struck out more than they have cashed in, and I think they just have to turn the tide a bit more. Although the recent, like the last few years, they've had good amount of success, but they've also had duds like Wonder Woman 1984, which, as much as I wanted to like that movie, It had a lot of problems. So I do think that, with Black Adam, again, it's not getting great critics reception. But if it makes money at the box office, that's all they're going to care about. Like, the money talks. That's really what's going to determine whether it's going to get a sequel. And it looks like if Dwayne Johnson's going to have his way, he's already been teasing Black Adam versus Superman. That post-credit scene might have given us a preview of it, or I mean, I don't know if maybe they're gonna have a nice conversation, and then The Rock's gonna be like, "I'm not a hero, but I do kill people," and then like Superman's like, "Well, that's not cool. Let's fight," or like, or maybe Black Adam's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, I'll
Watching
kill
that
you
scene
now.
though,
and
I gotta
whatever.
say,
don't know.
I didn't get the impression that it was gonna turn into a big fight.
Maybe
he
it
comes out
doesn't
of the
start
shadows
that
and
way.
it's like it
But
seems,
there's
it
an
just seems like a good
ideological
talk.
conflict that I think that pits them against each other naturally, because you hinted like the Superman, this Henry Cavill Superman, for him to work in a conflict with Black Adam, he has to be that Superman who's like, no matter what, I'm gonna do the right thing, and Black Adam has to be like, well, if you're gonna hurt the people I care about, or do something like do wrong by me, I will kill you. Like, he's willing to cross that line with far less remorse, and where Superman is like much more, he's like, I draw the line at killing people. So, or I mean, I know he killed Zod, but it was forced. People don't come at me. Like, seriously, I actually thought it was a fantastic choice from a writing standpoint for the Man of Steel. But since then, Zack Snyder, every version of, I mean, regardless of whether it's Zack Snyder directing or whoever else, Henry Cavill Superman on screen since that moment with Zod, he has gone out of his way to like make sure that he saves people's lives rather than like, having to kill somebody, even when the person might deserve it. Whereas Black Adam, he does not have a whole lot of reservations about killing people if he feels like they deserve it. So I think that could be the core of the conflict between the two characters.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the two guys could grab a beer and just talk it out, but wouldn't make it for a
That would
really
be fun.
interesting movie.
That would
I'd
be
watch
fun.
it. I'd watch it. 30-minute conversation. Dude, we'll do a My Dinner with Andre type movie where it's Superman and Black Adam at dinner just drinking wine, talking philosophically about what the ethical responsibilities are of Superman. I'd watch it.
Yeah,
Hell,
maybe
I'd
that's how it
direct it.
starts. The Justice League, Batman, or Bruce Wayne has invited the Justice Society to dinner with the Justice League at the Wayne Manor, and I guess things don't go as well as they hoped, and it becomes a whole. Maybe
that's the
they'll
other
call
thing.
it Justice Civil War. I don't know. I'm starting to mash things up that I probably shouldn't.
Do we ever? I did not sit through all of Justice League. Did we get into the headquarters?
They don't really have headquarters. I think they were, so at the end of the movie, there's this like in one of the closing scenes, they have like, because Wayne Manor and the DCEU is this huge Parthenon like structure, but that at one point was burned down. So you only have like the basic structure over there, all the walls and windows blown out. So Batman kind of walks in and he's like, a big long table and like, 7 seats. But then Wonder Woman walks in behind him and Gal Gadot is like, or Diana Prince is like, but room for more. And like Alfred is right there, like taking notes or like listening in because he's probably gonna do the work. So they hinted at like what could be like what do they call it? The Hall of Justice in the comics.
I think so.
Not like the floating tower in the animated Justice, which I was like, hey, I want to get to that eventually. I'd love to see that happen. But and then in this movie in Black Adam, we saw that they have this Professor Xavier-esque big, I don't even know if you want to call it mansion. It's practically like the the Versailles.
Yeah.
Like if you were to go to Palace of Versailles in France, it's like a palace that Hawkman lives in, which is, it seems like that doubles for the JSA's headquarters too. So
it may.
yeah.
It may, but in any case, it'll be interesting to see. It would be interesting to see them have a conversation. To do a superhero movie that isn't a superhero movie with everybody in costume would be hilarious, but I don't know how many people would watch it.
By the way, before we finish up, I just want to. This is one other thing from this article, and I just want to get your quick thoughts on this. So I hinted at this earlier in the show, that Henry Cavill isn't coming back for just like this one cameo appearance. he's coming back to do a lot more than that. And in this Hollywood Reporter article that we've been quoting, they mentioned that Superman as well as Henry Cavill, while they were not in the initial plans for Black Adam, because as The Rock said in his press tour, that the old regime that just were done with Henry Cavill's version of the character. Once the new regime came in, David Zaslav and co, they were like, yeah, sure, go do it. And that's why they shot a cameo like as late as, I think it was around Labor Day that they mentioned. But the point being, he's not just back for one cameo. Apparently, there's a new solo Henry Cavill like Superman movie, a sequel, what would be a proper sequel to Man of Steel in development, and they've attached like the same producer who produced like the original Man of Steel. He helped produce the Dark Knight trilogy. I'm forgetting his name. He's like the biggest in-house producer on the Warner Brothers lot. And he's basically been part of DC movies for a very long time, and he's already attached to this new Superman movie. I'm gonna find his name eventually. Actually no, that's Michael DeLuca. Charles Roven, that's the name. He's right here. So Man of Steel 2 is being produced by Charles Roven. Charles Rowan is like I mentioned, a prolific producer who, outside of Kevin Feige, I think has probably the best record with superhero movies in Hollywood. Although he's done most of his work with DC, whereas Kevin Feige did most of his with Marvel, or has done and is doing with Marvel. So they're looking for writers. They have a producer attached. Henry Cavill is clearly back. He must have signed some sort of a contract already, otherwise he wouldn't be in that cameo role. So I'm excited that this is a lot further along than people maybe thought it was, that we will see how this cameo goes and we'll think about it. No, this movie is happening, or at least is a lot further along than it has any business being, or at least in most people's minds. What do you think about the idea that we're finally going to get a Man of Steel 2?
Well, first of all, that's the right guy to bring on. Anybody who touched the Dark Knight trilogy, I would trust them with this. And like I said before, Man of Steel, they made some interesting choices with it. Some stuff I didn't agree with, but largely I do like the movie. I would like to see this. I'm ready for some new Superman content, period. I think the grounded treatment of Man of Steel, of The Dark Knight, that doesn't get old. And honestly, it was a great cast in that movie. They all did a good job playing the characters, making the reality feel real. And yeah, I'm surprised it's taken this long to even announce a sequel. Like, let's do it. Let's see it. I'm excited for it.
Well, I mean, for a long time they were developing like these 3 other Superman movies with other versions of the character than what Henry Cavill portrayed. So I think that was part of the reason. But I'm so glad. I don't know if those projects are still ongoing, but we do know this Man of Steel 2 project is now up and running, which I could not be happier. I literally had an ear-to-ear grin watching Henry Cavill come back in that Black Adam post-credit sequence. Yeah,
It's a great character. He's a good actor, and with the right team, they could really make that an event and something that people were like. That could be a great movie.
Yeah, and there's a lot more people who have, I think, changed their opinions, and I mean, there's still a lot of people who haven't, but like a lot of people have changed their minds about how they feel about Henry Cavill Superman over time. So I think that movie has better potential today than it maybe did even a few years ago. So it makes even more business sense today than it beyond just like the story or whether you prefer his interpretation of the character or not. Hey,
no, they are, all the pieces are there for them to succeed. Direct it well, write it well.
Absolutely. And they're looking for a director and a writer. I wouldn't mind if Zack Snyder came back. I don't know if they're going to go in that direction. I personally wouldn't mind. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would, and a lot of people out there who would love to see him back. But we'll see. By the way, just a quick nugget, and you don't even have to answer this. I just want to put it out in the world because, since we're good vibes in the DC Extended Universe, the DCEU, I would love to hear some news coming out in the next few weeks that Ben Affleck is decided he's back as Batman full time, and we're gonna get that Batman and Deathstroke movie with Joe Manganiello playing Deathstroke. There have been like rumors on social media and apparently like scoopers saying that Ben Affleck's been on the Warner Brothers lot a lot recently, signing all sorts of new contracts for appearances and whatnot. So I don't know. I think it would be great to see Ben Affleck's Batman and Henry Cavill's Superman on screen again in more stuff together or apart. I really love both of those characters' interpretations. So
I could take it or leave it. I don't know. And any people like Batman no matter who's playing him. I'll just say that. Everybody likes Batman. He'll be back. We know he'll
Yes.
be back. Tell us who your fan casting ideas are, what you think is the future of the DCEU. If you think we brought up any interesting points, if you think I'm an idiot, happy to hear you out on that. And, just be part of the conversation because it goes on and on and on. Like and subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Thank you for watching. This has been an episode of Oh So Curious. And now, we got other stuff. I'm sorry. I'm getting
You're trying to leave early? What's going on here?
I don't know if I'm leaving early, but it's
No, that's fair.
we got a review of ANDOR on Disney Plus, and ANDOR, I think you're gonna like it.
I see what you did there.
There you go.
Yeah.
ANDOR Episode 7. Wow, what an episode. Considering we just got out of the heist and what it seems like the dust is settling, I think this might be my most favorite episode so far. Great editing, great cinematography, and a very captivating, full of emotional depth portrayals and representations and characters, and I'm speechless. But yeah, let's dive right into it. It felt like a standalone film, like a start of something new, and literally in the story that's what happened. The heist was meant to represent something, and it did. And the series also took the similar tone. So you had this sort of a meta wink at the situation. Because the series itself, it feels like it's restarted. It's actually starting something new. We start with the great acting between the Cyril and his mom. And this back and forth, which doesn't even work only as a comic relief, offers you such a nice little taste of what Cyril's life must have been like as his mother's son. We don't only get a great piece of conversation, but we also get even greater understanding of what his life must have been like. Clever script, well done. It does help that we have high caliber actors joining this episode. We have Stellan Skarsgård, we have Fiona Shaw returning. You know, Stellan Skarsgård's got this double persona that he needs to play, and him speaking to Mon Mothma in such an intense way whilst also doing the show. A few scenes later, I'm gonna jump right now, but a few scenes later we actually see Mon Mothma do exactly the same thing. It shows this real emotional depth for both of these characters, Mon Mothma and Stellan Skarsgård's character name, which I can't remember. Let me quickly check. Luthen. His name is Luthen. Carrying on, Mon Mothma becomes far more content later on, and she becomes very sad. She's a very sad character in the old trilogy. That's why I wonder whether that has anything to do with the fact that she doesn't trust her husband, and perhaps her husband's going to be the one who's going to be this great traitor, and he's going to sort of try to rat her out, and that's when Mothma will become like the flag of the rebellion. These are my assumptions. These are my guesses after kind of seeing how she needs to operate around her husband and stuff. Similar to Luthen's sort of conversation with Mon Mothma and Mon Mothma conversation with her school friend, there was so much depth and so much terror and understanding what's at stake. So even though she doesn't even share with her friend what it's about, we can really feel how important the matter is to her and how desperate she is and how lonely she is. It's lonely to lead a rebellion from the back curtain, and she's such a fascinating character. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the trajectory of where the story's going to take her. With Luthen and Mon, we really get to feel how much they risk by doing what they're doing. But we also got to see real interesting glimpse into how Coruscant operates under the regime of the Empire. It's not pretty. It really reminds me of Hunger Games, this very dystopian, very horrific, tragic view of the world and what it can be. I really appreciated the fact that 15 minutes in and we did not see Cassian Andor anywhere, even though the series is about him. Literally in the title, we didn't get to see him for 15 minutes of the episode, and it was great. We got to see Fiona Shaw again. As I mentioned, she's returning. I'm glad that she sort of had one more scene in her. I mean, of course, she had more scenes in her. Cassian tried to convince Marva to come with him, but Marva sort of stated clear boundaries, clear separations, and pretty much her desire to have much simpler, less stressful life, which, hey, we can relate to that. And also Miro, another strong female character who's just being pushed around in the ranks of the Empire. She risked a lot by going, through the back door and pursuing her investigation, but it paid off. But yeah, I found it very funny how she's literally doing her job, and the Empire has such strict rules and such strict standards that it's actually impossible to do her job. Like, to do anyone's job, you need to follow the protocol. That's why rebels rock, and they always will, because they don't follow the rules, hence the name Rebels, right? I am literally looking forward to seeing every single character's journey and where it leads, and great episode, my favorite so far. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and may the force be with you, and off you go. Have a nice day. Bye.
Next week, next week we got a lot of stuff happening. So first we're going to take a look. We don't know the order of these things, but some of the things that you should look forward to. House of the Dragon is going to have its series finale, or season finale tonight. I think I'm tipping my hand at what I think of the show when I say that. But in any case, we're going to review that last episode and then take a look back at the whole season to see what has been developing in the world of Westeros.
Yeah, maybe there's more feet involved, a few more dragons.
Yeah, we need more foot stuff. Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, man.
Yeah, maybe we'll just do an entire segment on all the weird stuff they had us watch in that show, because there was plenty. And yeah. And then after that, the year in horror. It's been a good year for horror movies. The genre has had, honestly, it's morphed quite a bit from everything Crimes of the Future, which I loved, to Firestarter, which was sort of that classic, Stephen King-esque, horror from the 80s. The Stranger Things stuff, everybody's giving different artistic...
That's the best thing of the year. That's already, I'm telling you, Stranger Things was the best thing in horror.
You didn't even watch Crimes of the Future. You didn't even watch it.
I know I didn't. Okay, fair.
That was incredible.
Still, I still think I would have, whatever. You know what? Okay, fine.
Anyway, we'll probably have a lot to say about it. Rolan, our resident horror expert's probably going to have a lot more to say about it. It'll be a good show. So yeah, I'll be there.
I can't wait. And by the way, I can't wait to talk about the master. Well, no, never mind. I can't even keep a straight face. The masterpiece that is Halloween Ends. It's not a masterpiece.
It wasn't good. It wasn't great. I
mean, I liked it. Hey, are you gonna be dressed in a Halloween costume? Because it is gonna be like Halloween Eve when we do the show. Are we dressing up?
I don't know. Are we?
I get. Okay. You know what? I guess we will leave. I guess we will see. We'll just have to see that. Yeah. Right. And we will also, by the way, pay a tribute to one of the greatest stars of the horror genre of all time, Christopher Lee. We will be paying our tributes to him, who passed away a few years ago, but he's still remembered as some iconic characters, including like Count Dooku and Star Wars. So I don't know if you could associate that with horror, but he played a lot of iconic horror roles too. So.
Yeah, in fact, he even shaped horror, but we'll leave that till you guys actually see it. We put a lot of work into that, and paid some respect to a good legacy for a man who did a lot in his life. So be sure to check that out. And check out all the other stuff. We got a whole channel full of content, and we're always posting stuff, condensing things into Reels and TikToks for you on Instagram and TikTok. And we're on Twitter, on YouTube, Facebook, pretty much anywhere there's a place to find a thing. You can probably find us on the internet. This is the internet. And thank you for watching.
That was a classic intro, bud.
We'll see you next week.
Stuck in my head.
This is the internet. Goodbye.
Yes.